We've had a great response to these webinars, and it's our hope that they have served you well during this unusual time in our business community. We're very excited about today's webinar. As many of us have begun to work from home, the ability to maintain our culture and engagement of our teams during this time is critically important, and we're so excited to have our member expert, Andrea Greenhous, join us this morning. I want to say thank you to the sponsors that make it possible for us to continue to offer these benefits to you, particularly our community partner, the Ottawa Citizen, who support us throughout the year, as well our event partners, Enbridge, Gas, and Media Mall, and of course today's presentation sponsor, Vision to Voice. I'd just like to maybe take a few minutes to share with you some of the work that we've been doing at the Board of Trade. I think we're closing in on 6 weeks now since we were first announced as being I think a global pandemic, and certainly that we started to feel the effects of it here in Ottawa. During this time, we've been focused at the Board of Trade in maintaining our mission to create prosperity on behalf of the business community and represent your interests. And we've done that through a variety of advocacy initiatives, as well as continuing to provide benefits and amping up our communications as well. So as the programs have rolled out, many of which are aligned with our recommendations over these last few weeks, we continue to work with the government and our business leaders on making sure that access and implementation is high on the priority list. So with some of these programs, there continues to be some businesses that fall through the cracks, some uncertainty about how to apply and who is eligible, and then in some cases having access at all. So we appreciate all of the members who continue to give us feedback on this as we work with our colleagues at the Ontario and Canadian Chamber, Chambers of Commerce, with our local politicians and stakeholders at every level of government. I can encourage you to email us with issues that you continue to see and opportunities that you would like us to be aware of and promote. Many businesses have completely pivoted and changed the work that they're doing in order to get through, and many in support of other businesses and the community. So we want to hear those stories as well. We've set up a special email for you called strongertogether@ottawa.ca. We're also now turning our attention to the rebound strategy for Ottawa and working with business and community leaders to do that. So one of the things that the Canadian Chamber has done is partnered with the Statistics Canada. You would have seen our call out on our newsletters for a survey that they're using to create some baseline data as we design the rebound strategy for Canada as well. So I encourage you to take a look at that survey, and I think the deadline has been extended now till the 24th. So please consider taking a few minutes to do that. Thank you to Lynn Ladd and our team for putting together these webinars and all of our local businesses. As Lynn mentioned, we are recording them as well for your future use. We are also getting ready to launch a brand new series called Wellness Wednesdays to help business individuals and leaders to stay well during this time. And we hosted already one of our town halls, and we can look forward to a few more town halls as well. In terms of our affinity programs, the opportunity for you to offer benefits and save money. So the Chamber Group Insurance Plan is going strong, as well as our SO and Grand and Toy programs. And we have 2 new ones coming out within the next couple of weeks, so you can take a look at those. As well, we have continued to promote our members through our Member Spotlight. If you would like to be highlighted on our Member Spotlight, please contact Leanne at our office. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Andrea Greenhous. She is a very supportive member of the Board of Trade, active volunteer, and we're very grateful for her expertise. Andrea is an internationally recognized thought leader in internal communications, and she is the founder of Vision to Voice, a Canadian internal communications agency. Andrea's passion for internal communications began over 25 years ago when she saw firsthand how it could make a huge difference in an organization's culture. Since then, she has combined strategic thinking and fresh ideas to help organizations connect with their employees. A certified change management practitioner, she has also led many large, complex transformation projects. If she's not working, she can usually be found at a yoga studio, on her bike, or running with her Black Labrador Retriever at her side. Thank you, Andrea, for being here to guide us today, and thank you for this webinar.
Hey, you're very welcome. I'm just going to share my screen because I have a presentation that's going to help me and hopefully you as I kind of share my thoughts and some lessons. So just bear with me for a minute. There we go. Okay. So thank you, Sue Lynn, very much. Yes, I'm a big supporter and believer in the Ottawa Board of Trade, and I have a little bit of a shout out. First of all, it's been great to be a part of the organization. And you know, today, well, last week when I was getting ready for this, my internet wasn't working properly, and I was having some sleepless nights. And I phoned someone that I knew from the Ottawa Board of Trade, and it was Sam from Support My Mac, and he walked me through all the things I need to do. And he said, if none of those things work, come to my office, it's empty, you can give the webinar from there. So it's a really great example of the power and the connections that the Ottawa Board of Trade can bring to your network and to your business. So today we're talking about culture, engagement, and COVID-19. And Vision to Voice Communications, you heard a little bit about me, but what our organization does is we take a strategic approach to internal communications. So internal communications in a lot of organizations is considered the news. There's an ad hoc approach to informing employees. And we use a strategic approach that focuses on the business strategy and employee behaviors that are necessary to support that business strategy. So that's what we do. We work with clients across Canada and we help them, we say inform, involve, inspire employees. Now, before I get into kind of the tips and tricks of what you need to do to connect with your employees, improve engagement, and make sure that your culture thrives and survives at this time, I want to walk through how COVID-19 is transforming business and the employee experience. And what I've done, and I actually saw one of the other Ottawa Board of Trade members today just share the same sort of thing, but there's looking at the COVID-19 impact in terms of 3 phases. And the first one was really the initial reaction to what was happening. And I'm calling this containment. So, and different businesses had to react in different ways. So you saw essential businesses figure out how they're going to keep providing Canadians with services during this time. You walked into a grocery store and it was like nothing you'd ever seen before. There was tape on the floor, there were arrows, and the employees were acting very differently. Hospitals had to set up special procedures to protect their employees and to make sure they were ready. You have knowledge workers, people who are working for companies like say Shopify or the Royal Bank, where they packed up their stuff and moved to their kitchen table. And they were working, company was moving along, but they were in a very different environment. And then certain sectors, sadly, had to shut down altogether. And some organizations had a combination of these 3. For example, I just mentioned banks, but they have essential business services. They have to stay open. They have knowledge workers, and some of them shut down some of their branches. And at this time, businesses are really focused on understanding, what does this mean? What are the risks and the implications for my business? On the people side of things, you had a big change. People were asked to work in different ways, in a different environment, and maybe even use new tools. There's also fear and uncertainty that were affecting employees. The second phase, the phase we're in right now, is what I call the homebound economy. We're flattening the curve, we're staying home, we're adapting as best we can. Organizations now are turning to, okay, how do I support my employees? How can I learn from this? How can I pivot, adapt, thrive, and survive? And then one of the really amazing things is that a lot of organizations are turning outward and thinking about, how can we help? What can we do to support our community? Do we donate to the food bank? Do we donate personal protective equipment? What can we do to help? The third phase, and the phase that we're all looking forward to but wondering a lot about, is the rebound and revival phase. And Suling mentioned this as well. So it's, we need to understand the long-term impacts on the business. We need to prepare for possible outbreaks or hotspots of the disease emerging again, which is actually happening in some provinces right now, where we'll have to shift back to the homebound economy. We also need to look at emerging trends. How's this going to affect my business in the long term? And how does my brand recover over this time? For people, there's again enormous change that they have to go through. They're going to go back to work. They may have to follow different steps, different processes. So things are not going to be, it's not going to be business as usual. It's the new normal. So how do you help people adapt to that? At the same time, there's fear. You see the long-term implications of this pandemic are going to be some mental health issues for vulnerable people who suffer with anxiety and depression. You're going to have people who are afraid to come back to work. In Denmark right now, they've opened up public schools or the elementary schools, but parents aren't bringing their kids home or kids to school because they're worried. So employers are gonna have to make sure that their employees continue to feel safe and supported during this time. So I think, and I'm not happy about this, but it's good for me and my clients and my business, that internal communications is having a moment. Because how do you support people who are afraid, going through change, have a lot of uncertainty, and need support for their mental health and well-being, and who feel disconnected and have lost that sense of belonging in their organization? You do it with strategic internal communications. And communicating with your employees is one of the most important things that you can do right now. And we like to look at it in 3 ways. We like to make sure that your employees are inspired, that you reinforce your culture and your purpose so that your purpose becomes your North Star and everybody knows why they're doing things. You need to involve your employees. You need to keep them connected and make sure that they understand that their voices matter and that you're hearing their concerns. And then you need to keep them informed to support that change. Another big concern for organizations is their brand, and we believe that how you treat your employees reflects on your external brand. So this is why internal communications matters more than ever. Okay, let's get into the tips, because this is where the rubber hits the road. One thing that's really important is to give that sense of continuity and reassurance for your employees, is to reinforce your values. Use storytelling to highlight how employees are behaving that is reinforcing how you want them to act. Put your culture at the heart of all your communications. So I always like to say, wrap every announcement in purpose. So basically every announcement or every communication, whether it's from your CEO or from someone else, you make sure that you reinforce your culture, your values, and you and your purpose, what you're doing and why you're doing this. And make your communication human. This is a human tragedy, really, and we're all suffering. And so you need to use language that reflects that. The second thing, and this has always been important with change, but it's to share the why. Why are you making certain decisions? And including the why in your communication helps to deepen employees' understanding. It helps to give them context. And I mean, we all remember when we were kids and our parents told us what we needed to do, and we'd always say why. It's because it's human nature to want to understand and to ask this question. A really big and important thing, and I was just on a discussion group talking about this morning, was to welcome questions and feedback. You need to be listening to your employees, and it's not okay to not have all the answers. For example, I'll tell a little story. I have a contact, she's a communicator, but she also owns a couple of pizza restaurants, and they've implemented new procedures for their pizza delivery people, but they're not following them. And she said, I need to keep communicating. And I said, well, why don't ask them why they're not following those new procedures? What is the obstacle that they're facing so that you can address the obstacle? In change, there's often what I call some stickiness and some that slows people down. So you need to identify what's not working for employees and solve that, whether it's employees working on the shop floor or at home or wherever. You also need to be asking them, am I providing you with the information you need? Do you have more questions? How can I help? And employees always have the greatest ideas. When we're talking about pivoting and thriving and surviving, ask your frontline workers, is there a good way of doing this? Especially as we talk about the rebound economy and we've got employees who are not feeling safe. What will it do to make you feel, what will it take to make you feel safe? And how can we help? How can we shift your job or implement new procedures or safety mechanisms to make you feel safe? At the end of this webinar, I'm going to share some resources, but one of them is a survey done by Edelman, who's a big advertising agency. And they did a webinar about trust and a survey about trust and the coronavirus. And 78% of employees feel that their businesses have a responsibility to protect them. I think that's a really important figure. This is another really important tip or suggestion or strong recommendation, maybe even, is to establish your communication channels. I don't know about you guys, but I have to force myself not to check the news 3 times a day because I want to know what's going on. Well, your employees are wanting to know what's going on too. And you need to make sure that you tell them that you're going to communicate with them either once a day or 3 times a week or whatever it is, so they're not wondering what's going on. You don't want a communication vacuum because rumors will fill that void. For example, right now everyone's wondering, well, how are we going to rebound and recover? And even if you don't have all the answers, you need to communicate that. But I would establish, we're going to send out an email 3 times a week. It's going to come out at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we're also going to have a video chat with our CEO. So people can feel reassured that they know that you're going to be communicating with them and they know you're going to get the information they need. A lot of people are struggling with, how often do I communicate? And here's another statistic from this Edelman Trust Barometer, that 43% of employees want daily communication. So again, even if you don't have any updates, communicate. I don't have any updates, but these are the things we're working on. It's important. It helps with that uncertainty that I talked about at the beginning, the fear and the unknown. Okay. I just talked about when and how you communicate. What do you communicate? It's amazing the difference a few words can make. Communication needs to be factual. And I've got like an example here of what's not factual and what's, and it can't be vague. You need to be as open and honest and as authentic as possible. And the reason for this is because that builds trust. And more than ever right now, organizations want to be able to, or employees want to trust their employer. And you need to build that trust as an organization to go through the rebound. Otherwise, if people don't trust that they're going to be safe, that you've got their well-being top of mind, they're not going to come back to work, or they're not going to do their best work. And those things are important. So transparent, open, honest, clear communication is really important. Don't promote fear. They've got enough. So again, this is around wording and the type of communication, but don't use words like deadly, devastating. Please don't use there's some words that are being repeated over and over again, like what's the word that I see all the time? Like, I'm having a senior moment, but anyways, so again, you need to use specific words that have meaning. Stay positive. Now, this is a tough one, because you don't want to be so positive that you gloss over all the horrible things that are happening, because people are dying and businesses are failing. But there's a great article that I've got as a link at the end of my blog about this, and that I'll share with you at the end of the presentation. But it's basically around, it compares the kind of leadership we need right now to Winston Churchill. So it's not about dismissing how difficult this time is, but it's about making sure that you find the positive. And I'm actually reading this book called Broadcasting Happiness right now, and it's by the wife of a guy named Sean Anker, who's a specialist in positive psychology. And so positive psychology is all around what happens when you have positivity in your life. And it's been shown to fuel innovation and success. So if you're a leader or you're working with a leader, you need to make sure that they stay positive and they communicate in a positive way, because this is going to turn people's attention from worry to action. So, and I would, especially if there's small businesses on the line or whatever, like, try and find something positive to do. I know I'm part of the Stittsville Business Association, and we're working on getting videos done for all of our small businesses, because it's, it's a way of turning some extra time that they have into something positive. So clean up the storeroom, organize your files, do something that can have a positive impact on your employees. Even, explore new things. Like, how many times do we're always also busy. So take that extra time, if you have it, to do something positive. I'm not a health expert. And most employers are not health experts. So don't try and be the expert. And I mean, I wrote this at the very beginning of the outbreak, where, people are looking for answers, and the answers have changed quite rapidly. Like, the science has even changed about how it spreads, what the symptoms are, whatever. But don't try and communicate to your employees what that science is or what the guidelines are. Point them in the right direction. and instead focus on what's happening to your people and your organization, and use that should be the news, and that should be the information that you're sharing with your employees. Even yesterday we were talking, Celine, do you remember we were talking about on the Rebound how there's going to be specific guidelines for protecting your employees. And so make sure that you share those and you educate your employees, but don't try and interpret them in any way, because they'll change. And what I've seen a lot of organizations do is develop some kind of hub for information both on COVID-19 and also on what the organization is doing. And I do a lot of work with organizations with deskless employees, so they're on the front lines. They don't have access to a computer, and sometimes, so if you don't have an intranet, you can also use your website. You can have a special URL where people can access the information. So don't try and be the expert. Share as much information you can. Point them to reliable sources of information and Canadian sources, and create a hub of information so that there's a one-stop shop for people. But that's really important. I'm a huge believer in the power of an intranet site to provide employees with information. Before we started this webinar, somebody mentioned this is a real learning experience, and it is for organizations too. So you want to kind of create, I'm getting off topic, so don't ignore the slide, but you want to create a learning loop and share like lessons learned and that kind of thing with your employees. So let your culture shine through in your new ways of working. So I have a mastermind group, and I have some pretty big local companies on that group. And it was really fun to hear them share how on Yammer or Microsoft Teams or on their intranet or however they were doing, they were letting their employees be themselves, live the values, whether that's, one of them was laugh often. So they were making sure that their employees laughed often. So using your remote tools to really connect people and have that human side to your organization. It's also a good way to start using some collaboration tools. For example, I have one client where they had just started to roll out Microsoft Teams and only one group was using it. All of a sudden, the whole organization had to adopt it, and they did it. And it was, with very few hiccups. And now they're all using Microsoft Teams. Barb and I, Barb is the woman who works with me. We use a software called Monday.com. It's a collaboration and project management software. And honestly, I think it's one of the reasons Barb works with me, because she loves using this software. But we have fun with it. We let our culture shine through. So I think that's really important, is to use these new tools, but also not be afraid of letting your culture, which I kind of consider your brand personality inside your organization, let it shine through. Let it be real, let it be human, have some fun with it. Make sure there's opportunities for people to connect. One of the real sort of hot tips on this is, if you're using a social media tool, is to make sure that your leader is on it and setting an example. So people won't use things like Yammer or Microsoft Teams or any other tool, or they're more reluctant to, unless their leader uses it. So it's really important for the leaders to set an example and make sure that they're communicating with these new tools. I think that's all I wanted to cover there. Oh, this is a really important one. So I talked a lot at the very beginning about how all these stages of COVID-19 mean change for your organization. And so I have a lot of experience around change, and change is not easy. And people are being forced to change so rapidly, and they have no choice. So there's a lot of different ways to support change. One is what I talked about with, opening the lines of communication, making sure people are heard, but also to clarify expectations. There's a quote around, one of the biggest myths around communication is the myth that it actually happened. So you may think you're communicating and that the message is getting out, but you need to make sure. So you need to check in with employees, and people need guidance at this time around what are the expectations around hours of work. What about physical distancing? I mean, I've been in some grocery stores where the employees are the worst around physical distancing, and it makes me upset. What are the behaviors that you're expecting? These are really important. Are you expecting people to be working 9 to 5? Or what happens if they have children? How do they manage that? So being really clear on what you expect and what's okay. Lynn and I had a conversation about this yesterday. Like, it should be results based, not, how long you're sitting in front of your computer. What do you need to do? And it's more important than ever for managers to have those conversations and be supportive of their employees and really be clear on what people expect. Otherwise, you're going to have more anxiety, more uncertainty for people. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. What if I'm done after 5 hours? Do I need to sit and twiddle my thumbs for 3 hours, or can I go clean out the linen closet or take my dog for a walk and have a mental health break? So being clear on what you expect as far as work is super important. I think the last 2 slides are kind of the same when I was looking at it this morning, but really showing that you care and checking in with people. Again, this is like a human tragedy. A lot of people are scared and fearful. They're uncertain. So making sure people are okay. One company in my mastermind group, they've set up a buddy system. So they have, every employee has a buddy, and they check in on each other and make sure that they're okay. Have a survey, a pulse check. Quick question, how's everybody doing today? You can put something like that on your intranet site or send it out using some of the great internal communication tools that are out there. Just check in. So whether you're a manager or a leader, or whether you're just, concerned about a coworker. One of the things I suggested to one company was the CEO has like a virtual coffee with 3 or 4 employees every week. And I said, check in with them, but then share it and have the CEO say, I had my virtual coffee with 5 people on the front lines, and this is what they said, and this is what these are the concerns I heard, and this is what I'm doing about it. So show that you're listening and show that you care. And then the last one is, again, I guess it gets back to how you're communicating, but communicate with empathy and emotion. So a lot of corporate communication comes out as cold and lifeless. And, it's all around. I've heard some people say that, well, that was a tone deaf email. So right now, the world needs a lot more compassion. So again, your communication should show you care about the people in your organization. Make it clear that it's okay not to be okay. So yeah, and I like to communicate with employees, not just to connect with their heads, but with their hearts. Because when you've connected with their hearts, that's when they're really going to be motivated and passionate and work hard for you. So I'm trying to think of an example around how that is, but it's really just the words that you use in terms of making sure that you're showing that you're caring. Yeah, I think that's almost it. Yeah, we're here to help. And then And actually more on that sort of, we're here to help. For anybody, we're open to questions for free. Just call us up. We'll walk you through it. I've done it for a couple of organizations already. We've got lots of resources and tools, and we're glad to be able to provide guidance. And then there's some resources, the Edelman Trust report, some work around, or the Leadership in a Crisis article is really great. It again talks about how leaders need to have bounded optimism. So it's around being optimistic, but also showing that, you know, you're aware of the real implications of this crisis. And then the Globe and Mail article that I talked about Churchill. And that's it. It's time. Oh, that's it. It's back over to Lynn, I believe. Right, Lynn?
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was amazing. Just a couple quick things while we give Andrea a chance to rest her voice a little bit before we go into our Q&As. Andrea, there is one request. If you could type in the name of the book that you were referring to into the chat, please. So I'd like to take a minute to once again thank our sponsors for allowing us the opportunity to present to you today. Our community partner is the Ottawa Citizen, and thanks also go out to Enbridge Gas and Media Mall Marketing Inc., and of course Vision to Voice Communications, represented today by Andrea and her colleague Barb, who's on the call with us today. I want to share with you a couple of the webinars that we have coming up in the next couple of weeks. The next one is going to be on April 28th. It's titled The 5 Stages of Disaster Recovery, and that's going to be presented by the CEO advisory team at Stratford Managers Corporation. On April the 30th, we're going to have an inspirational fireside chat with Carla Briones and Steve Cody, two of Ottawa's most prolific serial entrepreneurs, and hear how they've managed their multiple businesses during this crisis. Oh, we're not supposed to use that word. Sorry, Andrea. After that, we're going to hear from our good friends at RBC, EDC, and BDC on May the 5th, and they are going to share more information about accessing capital. May 7th, our new friends at Business Sherpa Group are going to do a really interesting presentation on talent optimization in COVID-19 crisis time. And on May the 12th, Kevin Savoy of Binan Consulting is going to talk about the 3 roles of a business owner. And I know that you heard Suling mention that we're starting Wellness Wednesdays. We're going to start those on Wednesday, May the 6th at 1 p.m. And our very first presentation is going to be with St. John's Ambulance. They will be talking to us about mental health first aid, which is a really important issue right at the moment for everybody, and something that is near and dear into my heart anyways. So I'm looking forward to that presentation. So I think Andrea is probably ready to take on some of your questions. And of course, Barb too, if you want to unmute and hop in at any time. Who would like to start off with our question period? Oh, one thing I did want to mention was, you know, Andrea, good for you for making note of the issue of communicating and how we deal with our employees. Because I noticed about 3 weeks ago, Mark Cuban had said that how businesses deal with their employees during this crisis is going to impact their brand for decades to come. So Andrea, your presentation today could not have been more timely, so thank you for that. So who'd like to start? Steve, you have a question? Do you want to unmute yourself, Steve, so Andrea can hear you?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Andrea. I'm very inspired by all your good advice. Although I'm not totally in the business world now, I'm semi-retired, I imagine there's companies that had a lot of issues that were very urgent, that they called urgent pre-COVID. How would those companies address those issues if they still exist? How do they prioritize them?
So thanks, Steve. Well, so I'm just trying to understand your question in terms of other issues that are happening along with COVID-19. So again, I don't think you can over communicate. And you can also, one of the tricks I like to use when I'm drafting communication is layering my content. So, and that's as simple as creating multiple headlines with clickable content and different layers of detail. So you can address different issues and have all the information in sort of one good package. But I think a lot of these issues interrelate, and you need to make the connections for people too. So if COVID's over here and declining profits are over here, so people are really worried, then talk about those two together. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Ron, you have a question?
Yes, Andrea, when you're watching, switching from business to government, when you're watching local, provincial, national, Canadian government, does anything jump out at you in terms of what they're doing well or not doing well?
Oh, I got to say, that's a great question.
It is. And it's, you know what? It really speaks to the importance of leadership and communications. And you'll see like Rob Ford is having a moment right now, right? Everybody loves him. He's like Uncle, you know, Uncle Ford, and people love him because he's genuine and he's authentic and he's passionate. And another leader that I'm enjoying watching is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And she was the one, you know, she's talking about communicating. Actually, I have a note here somewhere about how she's communicating, but she was the one to say the Easter Bunny is an essential service. And she's on Facebook Live in her sweatshirt with her, you know, with her hair messy, giving updates. So, I mean, again, you see the Prime Minister, Rob Ford, and other world leaders updating every day, even if there isn't a huge change, because they know people are anxious for information. They're positive, but also, you know, sympathetic, and they are talking about the human cost of this and being very empathetic. And that's exactly how leaders need to be communicating. Oh, apparently it's Doug Ford. Barb's texting me saying it's Doug Ford. Okay.
Everybody knew who you were talking about. I think
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, that's a great question, but I mean, that's who you look to as your leaders, right? And there's even studies out there that are saying employees right now, they want to hear from their leaders. They want to see their faces. They want to hear from them. And it's really, really critical right now.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question for Andrea? Or are people too shy?
So one question I answered today on this chat group was, and actually came from somebody from the Royal Bank, Ron, it's just about how do I know if my communication is landing? Like, do people have the time and whatever? So what I said, my answer was, use your data. We all have, there's sophisticated data is available when you communicate with your employees. If you have the right tools in place, you can see how many people visited your intranet site. You can see there's email tools where you can find out how many people opened your email. Did they read it? Did they click through and read the article? So making sure, like, we live in 2020, there's metrics and data available, and they should be available with your employee communications too. So use that. Use a scientific, data-driven approach to making sure that your messages and your communication is being effective. And
So,
go ahead.
oh, I was going to ask you a follow-up question.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So I personally agree with you 100% that whenever possible, you would want to use a scientific data-driven method to check on your the efficacy of your communications. But having said that, when you say, for example, you're on a really small team. So OBOT, we have we're 4 people. And I think we're doing a great job communicating internally. We have daily check-ins. We talk about how we're feeling. But given the absence of data, how would a leader double check to make sure that their communication strategy is really hitting the mark with their employees? Is there any way to do that other than just literally following up with them?
Well, there's 2 other ways. And this doesn't apply to a small team. I mean, small team, you can just ask.
Yeah.
But one of them is to have a survey and just a short pulse survey. How are you feeling? What's your biggest concern? What are we not addressing in our communication? Where would you like who would you like to hear from? How regularly would you like your news and updates? You know, so asking them, you're paying these people salary. You have the right to ask them what kind of information they want, right? It's, and also a focus group, you know, if you because focus groups can actually give you the information that you need, the color behind your survey. And it's amazing. We just did a communication survey for a client, and the news that they were communicating was over here, and what employees really wanted to hear was over here. And the channels that they were using weren't what the employees wanted either. So it's really simple just to ask. And it takes, you know, I'm sure employees would want to take 5 minutes to fill out a survey to find out, or to get more meaningful and relevant communication delivered in the way they want, than to be bombarded by emails that they don't care about. And again, I tell my dentist if I want a text reminder, a phone reminder, or an email. So why don't we understand our employees' communications preferences? It's 2020.
Yeah, that's
right?
great. Thank you. So,
Andrea,
Andrea, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, Martin Lemay here. I'm with the government, with Environment Canada, and I've got a few teams under my responsibilities. And what I've done in reaching out to people is just actually going into very unconventional ways, reaching out straight to an employee to discuss a file or an issue, or just to check up on them. And what I realize is everyone is interconnected through different small networks as well. So if that employee is like talking to 3 or 4 people, so what I've done deliberately is actually reached out down to the employees directly. And I know I've measured the impact that this has had, because they've talked among themselves, say, hey, Martin has checked up on me and he's asking me questions on that. And then next thing you know, there's a ripple effect in the organization, and you're intertwined these different networks by reaching down to unconventional channels instead of going through your linear or your typical org chart. And that has done a magnifying effect in terms of people have voiced internally, hey, the boss is communicating throughout. So I'm just sharing that for food for thought.
Thank you.
And that's really powerful. Like, we have a very old style business is hierarchical, you know, top down with very little bottom up. But you're right, Martin. It's a network now. And especially if you have a workforce with millennials, they're expecting to be able to have a voice. They can tweet at anybody in the world. So why shouldn't they be able to talk to the boss's boss? So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where you have to be internal communications and communications with your employees. We have to be aware of what's actually what our employees are expecting with external communications, and deliver the same thing inside our organizations. A lot of organizations are stuck in the 80s, to be honest. Ooh. And that's why I'm around.
Yeah,
Andrea,
yeah, sorry, I'm just going to go back on this. There's one powerful reality show in the US, I think it's called Undercover Boss. And if for those who've watched this in the past, it's so powerful. Having a boss in disguise, if you're a top CEO and you mingle with the employees for a week, pretending that you're just a newcomer or something. And then the empowering effect that this has had. So I'm trying to keep that in mind when to say, everyone loves watching that show because it's so powerful, where the boss is playing in the front lines in disguise, and people love that. And then it brings the old company together at some point.
You know, I don't think Alex Munter will mind if I mention this, but I had a lunch. It was a senior communicators lunch with him. He's the CEO of CHIO, and he used to be a politician. And he said the one thing that's different, when you're a politician, everyone gives you feedback, whether you want it or not, about how you're doing your job. When you're the CEO, nobody gives you feedback. So you have no idea what really matters to employees. And I thought that was such an amazing thing. So he, you know, he's a great CEO, and he's made it his mission to find out what matters to his employees and how he can better help them. So it's really important. I see a question in the chat. Do you want me
Yes,
to?
from David. Yes, please.
Yeah. Any specific advice for improving communications when your leadership is always dealing with trust? Okay, so this is a good question, because one of the real foundational components of a rebound, of supporting the rebound, is trust. So communication can destroy trust, or it can build trust. And the way communication destroys trust is if it's full of, okay, excuse my language, but corporate bullshit speak. If you know, like a lot of people want to, if they're not sure what the answer is, then they try and kind of hide it behind some answer so the answer is not clear. So one of the ways to build trust with communication is openness, honesty, authenticity. Those are really the core components of communication that will build trust. You can't, you know, you can't have trust if you feel like your leaders are hiding something from you. And so that's key. And then the other thing is sort of open and honest and visible leadership. So that would be my way of addressing that.
And there's another question here, Andrea, from Bernie.
Yep.
He's wondering if online open forums or scrums would work for other sizes of businesses.
Yes. And so online town halls, where you have your leaders open for questions, is a very good way, or scrums, or even in smaller groups. But yes, and there it's about listening to your employees and understanding their concerns and addressing them in the most honest and human way that you can. And I see someone says, like, there's a great book on trust from former Governor General David Johnson. I haven't read that one. I've read the one by the Stephen Covey, the son of the 7 Habits guy. He's got 2 books on trust. I've got a lot of resources on my website. I've got a blog, and there's a blog post around really good books around building internal communications. I've got tons. I think I've got over 50 blogs. So there's lots of information on there. It's kind of my little, some of them are rants, but it's good advice too. But you'll see I've repeated, you know, trust, openness, authenticity. Yes, Celine.
May I ask, so we are a small team, and I think some of them would say we over communicate at this stage, if possible. But a lot of what you've said, I think, can be translated to, I mean, our organization is made up of members, right, who we view as partners. And so I think a lot of your strategies could be transferred into how we deal with our membership as well. Would you agree?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I started my career doing communications on Parliament Hill, mm-hmm. And then I did internal and external and marketing. It's all the same principles, mm-hmm. but there are some differences between internal communications. One of them is people work for you, you pay your salary, so you can ask them, you know who they are, you can develop personas and understand what matters to them. Mm-hmm. It's more difficult when you're marketing to, you know, a broader group.
Right.
So there's differences and there's things around change, but a lot of the principles are the same.
Okay. All right. I just want to say thank you for today, and I'm going to look up that book that you had mentioned. I'm a huge fan of Sean Accor. If anyone, if you're looking for a way to pump up your environment, watch his TED Talk, because not only does he have fantastic ideas, but he's hilarious. And so I appreciate you mentioning that. And I just want to say to you, like, over the last 6 weeks, of course, we've been learning a lot as we go as well. And but we have always been advocates for being careful about the language we use, because that can influence the way people feel and the way that they think. And we were using crisis in the beginning as well, and we've stopped doing that. And as we look at our communications and our business priorities moving forward, you know, when you were talking about, Andrea, how, you know, some communicators are saying, you know, these are our regular priorities and this is our COVID priorities. And I think that that thinking is starting to end, where we're realizing that we have to start looking at our priorities through the lens of COVID-19. And so we stopped separating our communications to, you know, sort of pre-COVID, post-COVID, and then it being in the middle, but rather how we're going to integrate our new economy into what our priorities were and will be.
Yeah, and you know, we've been through this shared experience, and I believe that we are all going to change. I grew up, I had a much older father, and he survived, he went through the Depression, and that shaped his behavior, and his behavior shaped mine. And I believe that all of us will, it may not be, I'm not going to call them scars, because again, that's a negative word, but this experience has shaped us all. And so we need to move forward with the understanding that we've gone through this, we've come out the other side, and remember what those lessons are, and what we've learned, and how that's shaped us. I'm searching around because I have an amazing quote that I really liked, and I shared on LinkedIn the other day. It's about this shared experience, and but I can't find it and I can't remember it, but you can probably see it on LinkedIn. But something along those lines.
We have time for one final question, if there's anything else from our guests today. And I don't see any hands up.
Good, I guess I covered it all.
I think you covered it all. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I particularly want to thank Andrea for her time and for coming up with this special content. And I would like to remind everyone, we will send out the webinar link. And Andrea, can we share your slide deck as well?
Of course, yeah, no problem.
Awesome. And you'll be able to get in touch with Andrea. Her contact information is there in case you have any questions that either occur to you later today, or maybe they're very specific to your organization and perhaps sensitive and didn't want to ask them in a public forum. I know that Andrea will be more than happy to help answer your questions. So please take advantage of her very generous offer. And I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.